All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going over a series of videos regarding MIT's App Inventor 2 for part of the Rankin Technical College Summer Academic Adventure Series. We're finishing up with our 7th app, which is a xylophone. And as mentioned, this is the only one that I took out of the book Android or App Inventor 2, Create Your Own Android Apps by David Wolber, Hal Abelson, Ellen Spertus, and Liz Looney. Now, as I mentioned to you previously, I have done a series of 75 videos on this book, including 5 videos on the xylophone. All right, so I want to jump into that, and I am going to just go over some of this material. Now, the author, there's stuff in here, it's hard to believe, this, etc., etc. So this is the one that the author builds. All right, and I've never even looked at theirs, so I'm not sure if they actually have the note name on there or not. It's not important. But you can see the interface is very similar. All right, so you can look at it that I ripped it off. Whatever you want to say is fine. All right, but again, this is the only one out of all of the apps that we're building. This is the only one that I have taken from this particular PDF. All right, so what will you learn? Use a single sound component to play the 8 different audio files. We already saw that. Use a clock component to measure and enforce delays between actions. And I did not do a very good job of that, so we're going to look at that in a moment. Decide when to create a procedure. Create a procedure that calls itself. That's also known as a recursive procedure, so we'll look at that in just a minute. The use of lists, including adding items to lists, accessing lists, and clearing lists. Other languages do not allow lists. They use things like arrays. And an array and a list is not exactly the same thing, but they're very similar to one another. So they tell you that this is going to be your interface, and then first they have you create the keyboard. I'm not going to go over that because that's what all the other lectures were about. But one thing I do want to mention, the author mentioned here under adding the sound component, says we don't have a xylophone without sound, so drag in a sound component. It says change the minimal interval property from 500 milliseconds to 0. This allows us to play the sound as often as we want. What does that mean? Well, if you look at it right now, if we go and let's go back to our designer, and we'll bring this up, and watch what happens when I hit this. There's a little interval in there. You can tell when I'm doing that. All right, you'll hear it probably in the playback too. All right, so how do we kind of fix that, so to speak? Well, what we want to do is we want to come back out to our sound property, which was just called sound 1. And right now the minimal interval is set to 500, and I did not do this. We are to set it to 0. All right, let's see if that changes anything when we start to hit this. Remember, since I made a change, the emulator has to redraw itself. Now, hopefully what you're getting out of that is the fact that it's a lot crisper and clearer sound now than what we had before. All right, so I made a mistake, but it's actually a mistake in a good way as far as I'm concerned, because it allowed me to explain that or tell you about that. All right, then they say connecting the sounds to the button. See, they don't do it in the same order that I did it, but the author says that when you want to connect the sound to the button, we could basically do this 8 different times. All right. But the author mentions then that it says repeated code is a good sign that you should use a procedure. All right. And that's what we're doing here. And we created that procedure already. So now when we click the button, we just tell it to play whatever note, and our play note just told us to play the associated note. All right. Now the author mentions, it says back in the blocks editor, create click blocks for each of the new buttons. We've already done that. Similarly, add each new sound file to the initialize. We did that in the bottom of our initialize. All right, and we did that, and what that does is it allows the same sound component to be used for any and for all of our sounds. So in other words, instead of having 8 different sound components, which we could have done, would have been kind of overkill, but we could have done that. All right, but now we don't have to because of writing it this way. All right, recording and playing back notes. It says, playing notes by pressing buttons is fun, but being able to record and play back songs is even better. To implement playback, we'll need to maintain a record of the played notes. And that's what we're calling notes. All right, so that's the names of the sound files in the order in which we played them. In addition to remembering what notes we just played, we must be able to record the amount of time between each note, or we won't be able to distinguish between 2 quick notes played very quickly in succession with one another. That's times. Now the author says we can get that information from a clock component, and that's what we added to our program. All right, so we added the clock component. Now, for reading notes and times here, as the author says, we now need to add the correct behavior in the blocks editor. We will need to maintain the list of notes and the list of times, all right? And we will need to be able to add to it when the user presses a button. So whenever a note is played, as mentioned on the bottom of this page and going on to the next page, we need to say both the name of the sound file, and that's notes, and the instant in time at which it was played, and that's times. So as the author says, in order to record this, we can use the clock 1.now, which captures the current instant in time. Hour, minute, second, millisecond, which is thousandths of a second. So if we play 2 notes in rapid succession with one another. All right, next, as mentioned here, and you can see it on the screen, when the user presses the reset button, we want the 2 lists to go back to their empty states. And we put that vibrate in there just to kind of let the user know. You may or may not have been able to tell that, but if you listen closely here, I'm just going to play something. Now listen when I click reset. You hear that little all right? And when I click play now, nothing happens. And I could play it again by clicking play again. When I click reset, again, it made that little clicking noise. All right. They do mention here that this is the first time Notice we've got a routine called playback note that's calling itself. That's known as recursion. All right? Even though this might seem a little weird, as the author mentions, it's an important and powerful computer science concept. The ability of a routine to call itself. So what it's doing in there is, for lack of better words, we're saying, hey, as long as you've got another note to play, call the routine again to play it. Now, recursion can be dangerous, and the author mentions that right here. If we would have forgotten to give ourselves a way out, so to speak, with recursion, that would have been a problem. All right. They do tell us right here, and I didn't do this either. The author says, we'll implement a delay by setting the timer on the clock to the amount of time between the current note and the next note. For example, if the next note is played 3 seconds after the current note, we will set the clock interval, in fact, I think I did do this, of the timer to 3,000. So it says make the changes as shown, and that's what's there. All right, we've done that as well. Now, what I kind of like about this book, as opposed to what I've been showing you and what I've given you, etc., all right, is the fact that at the end of each one of these chapters, and much better than I did it, the author shows you the completed app in one sitting, so to speak. Maybe make this a little smaller, all right, which is really, really nice. Then they finish each chapter by saying, here are some variations we could explore. The author says you could make buttons in there, for example, and you could add a button with a name of a song on it, or maybe several songs, or whatever, and make your own little xylophone jukebox, so to speak. All right. The author also says that currently, it says if you press reset while it's playing, it says this app should crash. Let's see if indeed that happens. Didn't break. All right. It says similarly, the user can click the play button while the song is already playing. Well, let's reset. Let's put a few things in here. Now I'm going to click play, and I'm going to click play while it's playing. So it just starts over from that point. So the author says that there are ways, fairly simplistically, that you could fix this. All right. Plus, every time they go through this, they go through what they've discussed in the current chapter. So I like this. All right. As I've been doing, what I'm going to do one more time, because I'm finished with this particular lecture, but I'm going to show you here what we're going to build next. And that is a takeoff of the old Magic 8-Ball app. Okay, there it is. See if we can get this to reload. So let's connect, reset our connection, connect again, and do our emulator. And what this should do is allow us to ask a question. And then have the Magic 8-Ball give us the associated answer. Just like the Magic 8-Ball, this is done just for entertainment purposes only, and that's it. And again, I apologize for resetting the emulator in here like this, but it is what it is. So ask the Magic 8 Ball a question, hit the submit button, and get your answer. Now you may notice a few things. I've got some help text. This is a text box. That's an image. That's a label. And notice we've got two buttons, and one button is currently grayed out. So we can submit right now, but we can't reset. What if we submit? Okay. I didn't check, but we should have checked, and we can do that to check if there's nothing in there. So let's go ahead and say, will I ever be rich? Oh, I'm sorry, I gotta reset it first. Will I ever be rich? It will pass, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But what I'll explain to you in this next lecture is how I created this app. And I'll be back with that shortly.